Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well? Hello, I can see. Hello, if you can say where you are from, just for me to have an idea, that would be lovely. Hi. Hello, can see lots of people coming in. Paraná, Minas. Hello, everyone. São Paulo, Espírito Santo. Welcome all. Very nice to see you all here. I'm very pleased to be here with you this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are, to talk a little bit about learning to learn in the context of teaching teenagers. Welcome, everyone. Very, very nice to have you all here to be with you tonight. I'm really pleased doing something I really love, which is to talk to teachers, hear from teachers, share some experiences. I hope this is an event where we can share some experiences as well. I'll be doing most of the talking, as you can imagine, but I really, really would like to see your voices, coming up on the chat with replies to some questions I will be asking, telling a little bit about your thoughts, your experiences, and I'll be talking a little bit about what I want to hear from you as we go along. So what I'll do now, after this welcome words to all of you, I'll share my screen and we'll kick off this talk. So just bear with me. Just bear with me just a second. Okay, so if you can just tell me, just give me the thumbs up if the interface is okay. Can you see the screen? Can you see me? Okay, excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm looking at two screens at the same time, so it's a bit confusing. So I'm looking at the presentation here and trying to see what you guys are seeing on the other side, just to make sure things are okay. All right, so we'll be talking about learning to learn today, which is a topic I have, in my heart. It's something I really, really believe in, and hopefully we'll be able to share some ideas and experiences tonight. And hopefully, after this talk, you'll have some food for thought, some new ideas for you to experiment with your learners. My website on this slide, if you want to get in touch with me later today. And before we start formally, just a few comments. Please try to communicate with me via the chat. I'll be trying to monitor the chat. If I can answer, if I think it helps the presentation at that moment, I'll try to answer the questions, your queries as they come along. If I think they will divert me too much from what I'm saying, I can try and leave these questions for later in the presentation. Or sometimes what I do in my talks, when I feel that I haven't had time to answer all the questions that the participants have asked me, sometimes I write a blog post about the questions. So keep an eye on my blog if you are interested in some follow-up or anything on my website. Okay, I think we are ready to start. So this is what we'll be doing today. We'll start with some definitions. Trying to define what learning to learn is. It's important to define what we're talking about, isn't it? And to discuss a little bit why this topic is important. Then we'll locate this topic in the context of teaching teenagers. And from there, I'll be presenting some materials for teaching teenagers how to learn, and giving some practical examples from these materials about forms of teaching teenagers how to learn. Sounds good? Okay, learning to learn. So this is our topic. Good, great. Yes, thanks for the feedback. Learning to learn. Okay, so let me ask you a question to start with, and to try to bring you all to this topic with me, so that we can try to do this together. When you see the screen, when you look at these words, learning to learn, what comes to your mind? What do you think? What are you expecting? What are your thoughts? So if you can just give me some answers on the chat. What's going through your mind at the moment? What do you expect to listen to and hear about when you see these words? Learning to learn. Motivation, anything else? Yes, sure. Strategies, autonomy. Yes, these are all very important concepts, very important ideas, very metacognition, fantastic. We'll be talking about that. So all these things are very, very important. And because we are all teachers, aren't we? Or I suppose most of us will be teachers. Let me give you a little task now. Whatever is going on in your mind at the moment, when you think about learning to learn, some of you have written down your thoughts, and those of you who haven't, write down what your thoughts are, or just try to keep your thoughts in your mind, your thoughts about learning to learn now at the moment. And at the end of this webinar, try to go back to your thoughts and try to revise your thoughts, try to look at them again and to see if your thoughts have changed in any way, if you see things in any way, in a different way or from a different perspective. And let me do some meta talk here, some talk about the talk I'm doing at the moment. What I'm doing here is a strategy to teach learners to learn, is to pose a topic like we're doing now, learning to learn, ask them to say what they think about it, what they know about it, what they expect from the topic. And after you've worked on the topic, after you've done, after you've had a class or your unit or your project, you go back to the original thoughts and you discuss these thoughts with the students to see what has changed, how and why. So this is a way of trying to deal with learning to learn with your students. Okay, so let's start with the definition. This definition I'm showing to you at the moment is a definition proposed by Cambridge Life Competence, the framework, according to which there are six competencies that we need to develop in order to prepare students for life in the future, facing with all the challenges that we face nowadays, isn't it? So there are 6 competencies according to this framework, and they are social responsibility, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creative thinking, and the 6th one is learning to learn, the topic of our talk today. If you want to know more about the Cambridge Life competencies, you can scan this QR code that you can see on the screen, and it will take you to the site where you can read more about it. But according to this framework, learning to learn is defined as follows. So in order to learn, learners develop practical skills to support and take control of their learning and reflect on their own progress. Right? So let me give you a couple of seconds for you to digest that and to read that in your own time. So if you ask me what are the key words in the definition, I would say that there are 3 very important key words there. The first one, or key concepts rather. The first one is skills. We're talking about skills, the development of skills. Then we have the notion of taking control, right? So skills, taking control, and reflection. So these 3 elements are very important. And let me give you an example. Suppose I'm a basic user of English. Suppose I'm just started learning English, level A1, perhaps level A2. Suppose I know the word top, for example, meaning, the highest position of something. I've learned this word, and then I'm having a conversation with somebody, and somebody looks at me and says, I like your top. And I don't understand, because I know top meaning top, the highest position. So I wonder, has this person just told me that, she likes, my top, the highest position of my body? Is it my head? Is it my hair? What is this person talking about? So in order to deal with this impasse, with this breakdown in communication, because I don't understand what the other person is doing, I need to negotiate comprehension, isn't it? I need to clarify what is being said. I need to ask for repetition or maybe reformulation. I need to ask this person to say the same thing in a different way. I need to say something like top, my top. What do you mean by my top? I don't understand. And then the person can then clarify, oh, I'm talking about your blouse. You know, I really like your blouse, or something like that. So if the conversation, so this is an example of oral conversation. If something like this happens in written language, for example, if I'm reading a dialogue, and if I read something, the same dialogue, the same context, somebody telling somebody else, I like your top, I need to know how to make sense of it. I need to go and check up this word in a dictionary, and I'll need to know how to choose the meaning of the word I'm looking out for in this case, isn't it? So all these things that I need to develop. So this is one skill. You're talking about skills. So asking for negotiation, asking for reformulation, looking up words in the dictionary, identifying the meanings I'm looking for in a dictionary. All these things, they are strategies, aren't they? Some of you mentioned the word strategies, and they are skills I need to develop in order to be able to learn and to take control of my learning. But importantly, this is very important. The action of doing these things is not enough. It's very important to have these skills and to perform these skills, but it's equally very important to reflect on how I use these skills and what happens when I use these skills. So it's a never-ending process of acting using the skills and reflecting on the action of these skills, so that I can reflect what went well, what didn't go well, what do I need to do differently in order to sort out this miscommunication, or this instance of not comprehending something, and then acting again to see if next time things will go better, if you like. So action and reflection need to go together all the time when we're talking about learning to learn. So far, so good. Just signal something on the chat for me to see if I can move on. Does that make sense? Yes? Good. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your feedback. I just want to say that I used this definition from Cambridge Life Competencies Framework, but what I want to say at the moment is that this definition is not a definition that is, the only definition about learning to learn, or the only definition that highlights the importance of learning to learn. Okay? These days, there is a trend, and I would say it's a global trend, to focus on the development of these skills, the learning to learn skills. This slide, what you can see on this slide, is one of the competencies described in the Brazilian BNCC, the Base Nacional Comum Curricular, which is the document that guides education in Brazil. And it is oriented around 10 competencies. And this is one of them, and this is actually the first one, which says that students need to value and use knowledge historically constructed about the physical, social, cultural, and digital world in order to understand and explain our reality, to keep on learning, and to collaborate for the construction of a just, democratic, and inclusive society. So as you can see, the notion of keeping on learning to learn is there. And if we dig into the words and into the ideas embedded in the description of this competency, you'll see that there are aspects of action, isn't it? Collaboration for the construction of society, using knowledge. This is all action, but there's also reflection, understanding, explaining reality. So all these things are together when we try to talk about learning to learn. And I could show to you examples, excerpts coming from policies from different parts of the world, which would be dealing with learning to learn in different ways, but still very much emphasizing this notion of action and reflection. Okay, what I'd like to do now, so I'll leave the screen now, and I'd like to ask you a question. It's a poll, so bear with me. I just hope I do this right. So I have a question for you. Can you see this question now? Who should be encouraged to learn how to learn, in your opinion? If you just click on the answer you think is the right one. Children, teenagers, adults, all of the above? What do you think? Just click on the answer. So if you think about focusing on, one age group or more than one age group, who should be encouraged to learn how to learn? Okay, I'll just give you a couple of more seconds. Yeah, so most people, I think I'll end the voting. As you can see, I'll share the results with you. Okay, so 50%, 56% of you voted, and 34 of you out of 61 are suggesting that all of the above is the right answer. We need to be teaching children how to learn, teenagers how to learn. And nobody said adults, but maybe the adults are obviously embedded in the all of the above, isn't it? And I very much agree with you when you say that everybody should be encouraged to learn. Shall we go back to our presentation? And I'd like to share with you two examples, which are very, in personal examples, to illustrate the fact that I think that, yes, everybody should be encouraged to learn. So the first example comes from my granddaughter, who is 4 and who started primary school last September. And in the first week of school, she came back from school with this drawing that I showed to you on this slide. And we were asking her what is. She was very proud, actually. She was just describing to us how she and 2 other friends had been engaged in this mapping of a marble run, which is this toy illustrated on the left. And the most interesting to me was that she told me that this is something that she did during independent learning. And I asked her, but what is independent learning? And she told me, she explained to me, well, during the school day, there is a time in the school day when we have to stop and do what we want to do. So it's independent learning, and you can do what you want to do. You can go to the garden, explore the garden. You can go to the other class and do something with somebody from the other class, or you can explore books or something inside the classroom. And she and her friends decided to look at this marble run and to draw a map of the marble run. And they are 4 years old. Let me just remind you. So as you can see, there is action, isn't it? Because they drew this map, and obviously to draw a map, and because there were 3 people involved, I'm sure there was reflection as well in the conversations they were having. But most interestingly, when she came back home, what she did, she got her map. As you can see here, this is her map, and she tried to construct another marble run using the map that she had drawn. Obviously, she wasn't going to do the same thing. This is not the point here. The point here is that a 4-year-old is being encouraged to act and to think about how to represent an object visually on a piece of paper. And I think this is fascinating. If you start doing this with 4-year-olds, or maybe even before, these children then will be able to gain the skills to to keep on learning and to keep on facing new challenges and representing them on paper and constructing new things, in this case, throughout their lives. I find this fascinating. So this is my granddaughter at one end of the spectrum, who is 4. On the other end of the spectrum, this is my father. So it's all very personal now. My granddaughter, my father. This is my father. He just turned 99 years old. And he recently wrote a blog post for my blog, a guest post, describing what he has described as a self-relearning guide. So at 99 years old, what he does, he has created this guide to learn again, to relearn, and to self-relearn, if you like, because he says that the concepts he has learned during his life, he doesn't feel that the concepts are very solid, and he needs to understand the concepts better. He's an engineer, so all the learning he talks about is very much, around mathematics, physics, this sort of stuff. And these are the processes in his self-relearning guide. He needs to find sources, 2 or 3 different sources describing the same thing. And then he would then understand the definitions and the concepts in these different sources, memorize, remember, try to apply these definitions and concepts, go back to the sources, revise, write things down, analyze what's been done before, practice again, draw conclusions, reflect, and then move forward. So as you can see, this guide that he has developed, invented in the blog post, he explains these steps better. The blog post is in Portuguese. Let me just warn you, but if you're interested, you can go to this blog post via the QR code. But as you can see, there's a lot of action and there is a lot of reflection as well. And I find it amazing that at 99, he's still trying to learn, isn't it? So, but it's something that he came to this conclusion, and I'm sure he has gone through a lot of work to be able to find this process. It's very interesting, isn't it? And if you look at this, what I think it's so much, it reminds me so much of Bloom's taxonomy, what he's done. It's so much what we find in Bloom's taxonomy, and he tells me he's never heard of Bloom's taxonomy before. So this is very interesting. And my point now is then, it's never too late to learn how to learn. It's never too early to learn how to learn. And we are dealing today with teenagers. So we're going to talk about teenagers and to try and find ways that would make sense for teenagers to learn and would be helpful if we like to for us teachers to help our learners to learn. So let's talk about teenagers a little bit. They're all different, aren't they? But they have some similarities too. And I just picked some aspects that I would like to explore in this webinar with you. When we talk about teenagers, it's important to remember that they are not children, but they are not adults either. They are developing, they have and they need a lot of independence, but they still need a lot of guidance. At that time in their development, they are still forming their hierarchy of values, their ethical code, what's right, what's wrong, this sort of stuff. And they still need a lot of guidance. They still need a lot of support. Another thing that characterizes teenagers very strongly, in my opinion, is that they want to belong in a group. They want to feel that they are part of the group, and this sense of bonding, this sense of being valued as a member of a group is something very important. And at another level, which I would say a more, let's say, trivial level, but it's important as well because these things will add elements that we can bring to the classroom and make the classroom more lively and more interesting. Teenagers often like technology, games, and music. Do you agree with these points? Yes or no? Just drop some lines on the chat box if you can. Okay, so I think we are in agreement. Good, that's good. So what I'd like to propose to you at the moment, okay, we're talking about learning to learn. We defined what learning to learn is, but we're talking about teenagers today. So I would like to bring these elements, and this is my icon for support. This is my icon for group bonding, group work. This is my icon for technology. This is my icon for games, gamification, and this is my icon for music. My argument, the argument I'd like to develop from now on, that we're moving on to more practical stuff, is that if we bring these elements, support, group bonding, technology, games, and music, will make whatever we do more adequate, more interesting, more suitable to teenagers, and they'll actually enjoy the process of learning to learn even better. So this is my argument, okay? Right, game changer. The examples I'm going to give to you, they all come from this brand new series by Cambridge University Press for lower secondary schools, Ensino Fundamental 2, in Brazil, called Game Changer. This is a series that has been developed by Brazilians. The authors are Brazilian, but there's a team, there's a global team of people supporting the production. So while we were writing my daily communication, I was talking to people who were in Spain, in France, in England. So a very international team that was part of this project. Everybody trying to give their best to make this series. And the overall objective of the series is to teach English, obviously, but not only that, we want also to try and support the development of global citizens, responsible global citizens, people who can be effective, efficient workers, responsible citizens, critical thinkers, and lifelong learners. So the element, the notion of lifelong, of learning to learn is a very strong element in the series as a whole. So the examples I'll be giving, they all come from the series. So we move on to a more practical part of the talk, really. So learning to learn in practice. Just one more comment before we move on to the examples. When we talk about learning to learn, we can think about learning to learn, stop. This final learn as intransitive, okay, so I'm learning to learn, stop. But we can also look at this learn as a transitive verb, and we can think about learning to learn things, what are we going to learn? So we can learn to learn grammar, we can learn to learn vocabulary, we can learn to learn pronunciation, you can learn to learn about the world, we can learn to learn about ourselves as learners. And these are the topics I'll be covering in the remaining of this webinar, looking at strategies for learners, for our students to learn these areas, if you like. So let's have a look at grammar. So in the series, grammar is extracted, if you like, from the reading and from the listening. So this is an example of a reading task. So this is a reading task about, it's a blog post about unusual towns. So there is a town in Alaska called Whittier, and this is a real town. It exists. It's a town in Alaska where everybody in the town lives in the same building, in one building. There's only one building in this town, in Whittier. And the other town is called Thames town in China, which is a town that, if you look at the photo, it looks like you're in England, but basically this is a town in China where, the buildings, the statues, the rubbish bins, everything else, everything just replicates English towns. So this is the reading text, and from this text, students are going to learn this structure. There is, there isn't, there are, there aren't, and this is how it's done on the following page. After having done all the comprehension of the reading comprehension work, students will then move on to the grammar section. And this is how the grammar section unfolds. Students start looking at the example. So if you look at the table is partially complete. So you have examples of affirmative sentences in the affirmative form, and you have examples in the negative form, yes, no questions, and short answers, both affirmative and negative. But the chart is incomplete. Students will have to complete the chart using excerpts, using parts of the text they've read before. So they'll have to go back to the text and find these sentences in the text, and they will then write here, there are red telephone boxes, and here they will write, there isn't a mall in Whittier. They will find these examples there. So it's all very supported, as you can see. So it's inductive, but it's very guided. It's supported. And the grammar work goes in a very supported way. Students will then read the questions in the chart, these questions here, which are repeated here, and they will then answer. They will have to choose whether the answer is affirmative or negative. They will probably have to go back to the text and find the answer. Another activity which is very guided, very supported. And finally, there is this box here, which is a box I think is very, very important and very interesting. I'll read that with you. It says, remember, we don't use the verb have. We use there is or there's for singular nouns, and there are for plural nouns. And then the examples. There is a mall. There are 2 malls in my neighborhood. And now I have a question for you, and if you can please share your thoughts in the chat box. Why do you think this box is there? What is the purpose of this box? When we wrote the book, what do you think was the idea guiding us, leading us to decide to have a box like that in this book, in this section? What do you think? Somebody said interlanguage. If you could say a little bit more about that, I think it would be helpful. Or somebody else, why do you think we need to tell students we don't use have, we use there is? Exactly, exactly. L1 interference, and therefore, yeah, interlanguage, because the students will be predominantly Brazilian, and in Portuguese, we use the verb to have to describe existence, isn't it? Something that exists, we use have. And something very nice about this series is that while working on the series, we had access to a corpus of mistakes frequently made by Brazilian learners in Cambridge exams. So we had a corpus of common mistakes. So these are the mistakes Brazilians often make at these particular levels, and we tried to address these mistakes. We tried to have a box highlighting problems that Brazilians might have when dealing with the grammar elements that we were working on, so that we could provide this support we so much talk about. So this is support. Now, so this is all very tidy and very nice. So this is a very tidy, let's say, class, isn't it? We read a text, we complete a grammar chart, we do some exercises, we think about, problems that we may have. So this is support, and support is very important. Now, let's try to make it more fun. How do you think we can try and perhaps bring an element of music together with technology to engage our students a little bit better and to make them enjoy the whole process? Well, my suggestion for you would be to, on this page, for example, and in similar occasions, to try and use some music making apps. Apps like, for example, GarageBand, where you can create music and you can record the lyrics of the music, put them together, and students know how to manipulate these apps so well, don't they? And we can then ask them to produce raps or some other rhythms talking about this, explaining, maybe explaining this box here in musical terms. And they could then create music, for example, lines like, if something exists, Don't say have. If something exists, say there is, there are. There's a car. There are chairs. There are statues in my neighborhood. Don't say have. So we could do things like that that would be really fun, and they could then create their music, present their music, and that would be a way for them to appropriate, take control of these skills in a way we talked about it. And they would have to don't say have, dude, perfect. And then they could then enjoy the process of learning to learn, right? Okay, so let's move on. How can we learn to learn vocabulary? Well, in the series, there's always a section where we try to introduce ways of categorizing vocabulary. So every lesson we try to come up with a different idea. So in one lesson we may talk about mind maps. In another one we may talk about making lists or writing labels for photos, or maybe, for example, sorting things. This is good, or this is bad, this is positive, or this is negative, things like that. In this particular example, what they do, they have to categorize verbs that they learn. So the vocabulary they learned is basically the verbs that are listed here. Decide, laugh, remember, rush, shout, tell, walk, want. And then they are invited to categorize these verbs in this chart, which says things you do with your legs, things you do with your mouth, and things you do with your brain. And I'd like to draw your attention to the second command that we find on the rubric. They have to complete the chart, but then they have to add other verbs that they know to the chart. So I think that here we present an extra challenge to the students. And if we think about a way of maybe bringing the group bonding to this activity, how could we perhaps do that? We could do that in many different ways, isn't it? I'll just share an idea. You'll probably think about other, many different ways of doing that. If you want to share your ideas in the chat box, you're more than welcome to do so. One way I thought that we could do in order to encourage students to have some group bonding while carrying out this activity would be, for example, okay, so they have filled out the chart, they have completed the chart, they have added other verbs they know, or if they don't remember, they will be encouraged to look up words in the dictionary. And after that, they would then move around the classroom and try to find other students who have different verbs that they haven't included in their own chart, but most importantly, and add these verbs to their chart, but most importantly, try to find students who don't have the verbs they themselves have added to the chart, and to teach these verbs to them. By doing that, we would create this sense of learning community in the classroom, isn't it? So I know something that I can teach you, you know something that you can teach me. So we are all together in this teaching and learning. I teach you, you teach me. And this is the sense of I value you because you teach me things that I don't know, and you value me because I teach you things that you don't know. So I think this is a very good way of creating this group bonding that I think is so important. Let's move on to pronunciation, learning to learn pronunciation. So this is an example. Of a box that you can find in the series. In every speaking activity, in every speaking section, there's always a pronunciation box, and there's always something like that. They'll have to listen to some sentences, and they have to pay attention to something when they listen to whatever they listen. In this example, they have to pay attention to the pronunciation of the ed, the past form in the simple past. So they'll listen, they'll hear these sentences, and then they'll listen again and repeat. And in the series, these examples can work like this example on what we call segmental properties of pronunciation, which are consonants and vowels, or they can focus on what we call suprasegmental properties of pronunciation, which is stress, rhythm, intonation, in this case, intonation. And these boxes are informed, if you like, by the idea of noticing, which is a concept proposed by the applied linguist Richard Smith in the 90s, according to which in foreign language learning, in order to learn something, you first have to notice it, right? So basically what we're doing here, we are providing support for students to notice something in these boxes. So that's support. Now, how can we perhaps add an element of gamification and group bonding in these activities? Again, we can do that in several different ways, and I'm just going to share an idea with you, illustrating a game we could play, for example, in relation to this box about the ed form. What we could do, for example, after working on the pronunciation box, would be to ask each student to write a sentence about something they did on the weekend using a regular verb, using a verb with the ed form in the end, using a regular verb in the past, and write a sentence and write their names on a piece of paper. So we would then put all these pieces of paper in a bag. We would put them all together in a bag, just mix them all together, divide the class into groups. They have some different groups around the class, and then circulate the bag around for different members of the different groups to pick a sentence and to read a sentence. And the reason for the name is because, for example, if I wrote a sentence like, okay, I visited my mother on the weekend, stop, Denise. Okay? If somebody picks up this sentence, this person would then read, Denise visited her mother on the weekend. And then the group would then have to judge whether the pronunciation of this past form is correct or incorrect. If it is correct, the group, scores a point. It's the usual procedure, nothing new about that. But then we have this element of gamification just to practice something that can be perhaps too dull or too technical, but we add this element to motivate students and to make them, more engaged in the whole process. Now, learning to learn world knowledge. In the series, we often have a web quest together. We always have a web quest accompanying one of the reading texts in every unit. And in this example, so they've read a text about the history of storytelling, and as part of the reading activity, they then have this web quest, which is basically learn more, check, true or false. There are prehistoric cave paintings in Piauí, Brazil. So what they have to do, basically, they are faced with a statement and they have to research information to judge whether this statement is true or false. And this is a true statement. There are prehistoric cave paintings in Piauí, Brazil, but many people don't know about that. So my hunch is that students will find many students will find very surprising to know that this is a true statement, and they will maybe be interested in learning more about the topic. The next box, you can read there what you can see in the teacher's book accompanying this particular activity. So these are the steps that are suggested in the teacher's book. Ask students to raise their hands if they have ever entered a cave. If so, have they ever seen a prehistoric painting? Then have students research on the internet if the statement is true or false, like I said. Remind students to check 2 or 3 websites to confirm their answer and to use reliable websites. Ask them then to research more prehistoric caves around the world and have them share their findings. So as you can see, there's a lot of support. The teacher's guide is supporting the teacher. The teacher can do all these things supporting the students. But how can we perhaps form and encourage some group bonding together with this activity? We could, for example, encourage students to research about the topic and to create a collaborative file, maybe on a Google Documents or a wiki, just putting together all the information that they have gathered and using this information as as reference for further research and for other things they might be doing. So this is definitely something that they could do using technology. I think a wiki would be a lovely idea where they could record all the findings of all the research they would be doing throughout the year with the various web quests they would be doing. Now, a very important process of learning to learn is to learn about ourselves as a learner, isn't it? Because I need to understand, and all of us need to do that, what helps me learn, what helps me learn most of the time, what helps me learn at the very moment in a particular challenging situation. So it's very important that we develop these skills with our students. And remember, these skills that will need to have an element of reflection at the same time, creating this cycle of action and reflection. And I'm going to give you a few examples of ways we can encourage learners to learn about them, to learn about themselves as learners. So a very typical example is a self-evaluation a box. Typically, we find these things at the end of units, isn't it? In Game Changer, we find boxes like these in review chapters, review sections. We have these sections in every other unit in the book. So as you can see, the check your progress is phrased around can-do statements, around abilities, not about content. It's not about grammar. It's not about vocabulary per se. It's not about language. It's about can do. It's about things. It's about abilities and skills. So I can, for example, talk about famous firsts in technology. I can use the past progressive. I can talk about the natural world and the weather. I can use verbs to express likes, wants, and needs, and use connectors. And I would then judge whether I'm happy with these skills. I can do them. I'm confident I can do them well, or whether I'm not very happy. So I would then check the correct answer. How could we add an element of group bonding in this type of activity? Would anybody like to give a suggestion in the chat box? Self-evaluations can be quite individual. They can be quite lonely sometimes. How can we make them more engaging, thinking about, this community of learners we would like to form with our students? Any ideas, any suggestions? Make a survey to score, to keep a record of replies, to see how many students answered confident, how many students answered not confident. This is a very good idea, very good idea. What I also thought that we could do, suppose, for example, I mark here, I'm very happy with this, I'm very happy with this, but I'm not very happy with this. So I will tick here. I will tick here, and using verbs to express likes and wants. Okay, I'm good with this one as well. Okay, so I would tick happy face here. But remember, I would have a unhappy face here. What we could do then would be to put students together in groups that they are comfortable with and have students share their self-evaluations. And if the person next to me is ticked a happy face here, if this person is confident about talking about the natural world and the weather, this person can then give me some tips, give me some hints, show me where, for example, in the book I can find more information, giving suggestions to me, or where I can learn more about this, who I can ask, and what I can do. So again, we can put students together in order to help them be their own teachers of how they can improve in the areas they are not very comfortable with. Another way of helping our students to learn about themselves as learners. So this is a complicated way of expressing this idea. In Game Changer, we have again in the review sections, we always have a box called Learn to Learn. And these boxes are quite interesting because in every unit, we try different strategies. We suggest different learning strategies. And these strategies try to cater for different ways of learning, you know. So sometimes they are they involve a lot of writing, sometimes they involve drawing, sometimes they involve music. In this example, they involve audio abilities. We suggest recording vocabulary. Record yourself saying words you learned, then record yourself saying them in sentences. Listen to your words in sentences every time you want to review vocabulary. So in this example, they've learned rainy, and then this girl, she says rainy, and then she makes a sentence, it's rainy today. So she records it on her phone, and then she has, you know, several files, because she would then be recording different examples and going back to these recordings every time she wanted. Now, how could we perhaps bring an element of technology? There is an element of technology here, isn't it? Because of the use of the phone in any case. How could we perhaps create an element of, again, group bonding to deal with these learn to learn boxes? We could, for example, again, have students put all these strategies in the same file so that they could have access to them whenever they need it. They could use, for example, Padlet, the application Padlet, to put all these resources, all these ideas together. Or they could use, for example, Jamboard with Post-its, just summarizing these ideas together. They could create files with strategies and ideas that they could go to for information, but that they could also share with their classmates whenever they wanted an idea of how to learn a new vocabulary, for example. And finally, I'd like to share these suggestions with you. One way of helping our students to learn how to learn about themselves as learners is to explore the unit goals in a textbook. What I feel is that sometimes, so this is the first page of a unit, you know, so the nice photo that you know triggers our curiosity, our imagination. There's usually something like that, and there's always some activities, and unit goals are usually there, but I don't know if you agree with me, but I get the impression that they tend to be forgotten. They tend to be just there, you know, something that teachers sometimes don't spend too much time on, that students don't spend too much time on. And I strongly believe that we can use these unit goals to help students learn to learn. So let me just enlarge. So this is an enlargement of the box you can see there. And just to finalize, this is my final example. I'll try to use this final example, bringing back all the elements that we've been talking about in this webinar, the elements that I think that we should integrate in our classes to teenagers when we talk about learning to learn. So the first one, let's start here with group bonding. So suppose I'm starting this unit, right? And I have these unit goals to deal with. What could I do? I could, for example, ask my class what they know about these skills, about these elements, about this content, what they know about it, what they would like to know about it. And I could list those ideas, what they know about it, what they would like to know about it, in a chart, you know, the so-called KWL chart. So they would list what they know on the K. They would list what they would like to know on the W. And at the end of the unit, they would then complete the final column of the box of the chart, the L column, with what they had learned about the topic. So I could start the unit doing that, filling out this KWL chart, the first two columns. So this would be done individually by all the students, and I could bring then this group element to this activity, putting students together and sharing what they know about these elements and what they would like to know about these elements. Because I'm sure you have come across situations in your classes, in your personal life, when sometimes you are with a group of people in a presentation or in a class or something, and then somebody else next to you asks a question that you go and think, oh, I hadn't thought about it, but that's a very good question. I would like to know the answer to that question too. So this is what we could be doing at this moment if we pair up students, if we group students and share their lists of would like to know. Okay, and then how could we provide support to this work? And this work would be done all through the work, all through the unit, if you like. A way of doing that, for example, would be to try and go back to those learn to learn boxes, the strategies, the learning strategies we talked about in the previous slide. We could try and bring all the strategies they had already learned about, they've heard about, and try to use those strategies to deal with this new concept. Okay, so I can record sentences now about different types of houses in the world, about furniture, for example, and the other strategies they would have learned. How can I bring in an element of technology? Oh, in so many different ways, right? We could, for example, in using more simple technology, this is about houses, this is about furniture. They could take photos of furniture in their houses. They could take photos of houses in their neighborhood and share these photos and talk about these photos in class, upload these photos in some applications. If they can use these applications, we could use that. In terms of gamification, we could have students do all sorts of games. For example, if they want to use technology together with it, they could use the app Wall and create several games that could be used. To practice this vocabulary and this content. And in terms of music, we could do what we said before. We could use music making apps and ask students to make music, to make raps, to make music using rhythms they wanted, to talk about houses and to use this vocabulary. So these are all ideas that we could use. Some final thoughts. I think I'll just try to go through and see. Kahoot, yes, Kahoot is a good idea as well. Things to remember at the end of this webinar. Teachers can learn to teach learning to learn, right? We can learn how to do it. There are several ways we can do it. Something that we can, some students can learn to learn automatically, but some other students don't, and we can help our students to do that. And one way of doing that is to help students develop a repertoire of skills. They need to have several ways of dealing with the unknown, dealing with difficulties, in order to pick one, to choose the ones that they think is the most appropriate. So the more we do different things, different games, different questions, different apps, different strategies, the more we do different things and familiarize students with these different things, the more they know and the more they can pick when they encounter a challenge. But remember, action is not enough. Reflection is a must. So we need to act, do things, use the skills, but also reflect on these skills and go back to this action in a never-ending cycle. And if you bring these elements that we talked about, we can make the whole process more enjoyable, in my opinion. And listen to teenagers, respect them, involve them, because if we involve them, it will be much more fun and much more it will create conditions for learning in much, much better ways. And as to you, I would say have fun and learn in the process, because if we are talking about learning to learn, we need to keep on learning to learn forever, all the time as well, isn't it? So basically, this is all I have for you. If you want to know more about Game Changer, there is a link there. And if you want to get in touch with me, this is my site, and all my social media is professional. So if you want to get in touch, just find me on on these sites, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Do we have time? I think we have time for a question. Is there a question? Let me just retrieve Q&A and see if you want to type something in the chat. Let me just see if I can find something. No, there's nothing in the Q&A. If you want to ask me something. I can't see anything. Well, thank you very much then, everyone. It was a pleasure being here with you tonight. I hope you got something from this webinar. Thank you all. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.